shows up, and we haven't seen him for a while.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Flat Pack Show. Oh, sorry there. Episode 68. I'm your host, Flatmeister. We've got Nerd Waffle with us.
I can't wait till next week when it's the magic number.
Episode 69. Hey,
oh shit! Sorry, I thought 70. No, 70 is the magic number.
We'll be debuting the show on Pornhub instead of YouTube. Just jump straight.
Yes, yes.
Today's topic is about sex in fiction. What's the best position you've seen? No.
I mean, we really should have if we were good. If we were better planners than what we are. We would. That would have been a good idea.
We haven't got Switchpoint with us, unfortunately. He's doing some maintenance and tech support on his PC. But we have Crumplepoint with us. He's not been with us in a while. Hello, Crumple.
Sup? Yeah, Switchpoint is away helping all the boomers reboot their computers.
I'd like to point out that I never see Switchpoint and Crumplepoint at the same time. I would just like to point that out. Are they the same person?
No, but we are closely related.
Down. Not that.
You darling Trump.
Not that kind of closely related. So welcome to the Flat Pack Show. We were Wednesdays always come up so quickly. The week passes by and we're like, oh shit, we need a topic. I know this topic was suggested by Crumple last week, and he wasn't able to make it, so we sort of carried it over to this week. So it's about utopias and dystopias. Now, I always sometimes get the two mixed up. Did either one of you want to explain what a utopia and a dystopia is for the lovely audience?
Briefly, just to show my hand a little bit, I would say that a dystopia is like people usually set them in the future. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but yeah, dystopia is like usually some kind of totalitarian, awful setting that is horrible to live in, and where the horrors are built into the system and the way everybody thinks and society at large. And a utopia is a dystopia that hasn't been outed yet, in my opinion, because I'm yet to see a utopia in fiction where I'm like, oh wow, that looks genuinely nice.
To be fair, utopia is the sort of can be the opposite of a dystopia. One sort of pleasant and everything apparently or seems like it worked out, and dystopias where things apparently didn't work out. Now I say apparently because that's a general rule of thumb. Now people have played around with that and worked it differently, but that's essentially it.
Yeah, because I suppose a utopia could be that's what the world within the fiction becomes at the end.
Could be.
So take for instance, what came to mind instantly was the end of Matrix Revolutions. So the third movie, the Matrix spoilers. The Matrix gets rebooted. You know, Neo goes to the source and gets rid of the Smith virus.
Yeah, that's what Searchpoint's doing just now.
If you haven't seen The Matrix by now and it's been spoiled, I don't give a shit.
He is the one. But yeah, the Matrix essentially, after it's been rebooted, it becomes a utopia. But there's that bit at the end where the Oracle and the Architect are saying, finally they have peace, and the Architect says something along the lines of, yes, but for how long? So it is a cycle, isn't it? That peace is found between...
They made references in The Matrix to the fact that The Matrix was initially a utopia, but everybody rejected it. And the Architect actually talks about the fact that people... He was kind of talking about the need for strife. Otherwise people know that it's not real.
They wouldn't accept it.
I think the other thing that... it's a shortish scene and it's very heavy, so he probably didn't get a chance to go into this, but it was like, I think him being a machine, he's obviously also overlooked the fact that it's an entirely subjective thing. So like a utopia for me, if you were designing it and putting me in my little mental pod, there would be a massive amount of challenge in it, and it wouldn't be, you know, this heavenly easy breezy time. It would probably be a very, very difficult world to live in, but with massive rewards. But it would have to be tailored towards me, and that would be, you know, tilted in my favor to win, obviously, but there would be genuine hardship. I mean, you see it all the time with computer games. If they were easy and winnable all the time, you'd get bored. So with the utopia thing, that's why they're so hard to make, because like if you read there's several philosophers that have made attempts to write about utopias and things like that, and they're always hellscapes. You know, they're always writing as like, oh, this beautiful world, and then they describe it, and you're like, this sounds like hell split open from the pavement. But
I was also going to bring up
the point. That's kind of why I made that joke at the start, because both a dystopia and a utopia are almost indistinguishable from totalitarianism. Not exclusively, but...
Because you just reminded me, do you remember the Neil Blomkamp movie Elysium with Matt Damon?
Mm-hmm.
And so Elysium, the space station that is above in orbit of the Earth, is the utopia. And it's like you said, that a utopia is a dystopia that's yet to happen, hasn't it?
Yeah, Star Trek had a load of interesting takes on that, because Star Trek takes place in kind of a utopia. But that's done in a sense of they're trying to get the sort of not the boring stuff. They're trying to keep the story focused on exploration. So to keep it focused on exploration, they have to say, look, everything at home is perfect, right? Now focus on the outskirts. That's why they're out there. And they come across a bunch of utopias in Star Trek, and they're almost inevitably outed as these horrible, shitty places to live.
They have played around with that, though. They have played around with now I don't know if it was on Next Gen or which Star Trek, but a few where they have played around with the fact that Earth has solved many of its problems and appears to be a utopia. And other sci-fi things played with this too, where everything appears in the utopia as being perfect, but with underlining problems like at what cost is this utopia? Like, what's going on in the background to cause it to be a utopia that they're not really talking about? Like, do they power the engines of the utopia with like underground slaves that nobody ever sees, kind of thing? Or do they power it by I don't know, throwing people into an incinerator, kind of thing? I don't know, something crazy.
Well, that was one of them was Wesley Crusher. They're on this like utopia. It's like the Garden of Eden kind of thing, and everybody's super happy and all that shit. And then Wesley trips over a plant or something and kills it, and is sentenced to death, because that's the twist. It's like, oh, if you break any of the laws, it's a death sentence straight away.
Shut
they did
up,
a similar
Wesley.
thing to that in Justice League with the Justice Lords, with the evil Batman. It's like you got caught jaywalking, you'd get arrested and presumably killed. And
is that in the? Are the Justice Lords like? Because I haven't seen a comic of it. Do they have their own comic, or is that just exclusively for the cartoon?
No, they're in the Justice League comics. It was I don't know if it was. I think they had their own like series where they were fighting the Justice Lords. That unfolds very kind of similarly to the cartoon, but with a few. Like the themes are the same, but the plot's different.
Yeah.
And then they kept bringing them back for various different things, but I can't remember the author that came up with it, but it was way back in the 80s or something, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
But with Utopias, it's like, I think that they can be a handy device for if you to tell a very focused story like Star Trek, or I can't think of many others, to be honest. I guess in Lord of the Rings, Elf Kingdoms, Asgard as well. Like the Elf Kingdoms and Asgard are utopias because they don't want you looking at that. It's not important. They want you to focus on something very specific. So they just say, "Look, society runs perfectly. Stop looking at that. This is where the action is." You know.
Yeah. But Asgard is perfect, and no, we got here on our own. Oh wait, shitheads at one point beat everybody into submission, and
that's what I liked about that movie Elysium, with the space station being this utopia, but they had all this futuristic technology that could cure, these special machines that could repair cells and could repair irreparable damage. Like there's the main villain, or the sort of henchman Kruger, gets his fucking face blown off by like an explosion, and this machine completely restructures his face, like repairs it. And like the world has just gone to shit. It's like the whole world is like a third world country, but this rich elite 1%. Obviously, like there was themes of class and things like that in the movie as well. Classism.
But I gotta see that movie. One other movie that did it pretty well, which was actually kind of was The Island.
The Leo DiCaprio one.
Yeah, an interesting thing about The Island, and I was thinking of the example of Krypton in Man of Steel, is I think they're both based off of Plato's Republic. Yeah. And he'd written the Republic as this, utopia, and if you actually read it, it's this fucking absolute nightmare of a scenario.
No, hang on a second.
The island, they basically are living in a carefree society, like they're not supposed to have cares and worries, and at the same time it's costly because Lincoln 3 Echo, what's his name's character, Obi-Wan.
I was about to say, am I getting films mixed up? It's the one with Ewan McGregor, isn't it?
Yeah, Ewan McGregor, and Scarlett Johansson, and like he even goes into breakfast, and they're like, "Yeah, can't have bacon," and he's like, "What? I can't have bacon? I want bacon," and he's like, "No, this is for your protection. We want to keep you nice and healthy." And then they do a lottery system. And the winner, they're super excited, and they film them, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to the island, and it's gonna be great and awesome, and everything's good because I won and stuff, and this is a utopia." And then you come to find out that they're essentially like parts for the rich. So like, a rich person needs a kidney transplant. Well, you got somebody, and they'll select him for the island, and then they'll...
Yeah, that was a good film that posed a lot of questions but didn't try and answer too many of them. I quite like that. Like, the bit where the bad guy in it is Sean Bean's character is just like, mate, I don't really give a crap that you're going to have a hard time and get chopped up for parts because I'm going to have cured leukemia by 2 years' time. It's like,
Yeah.
that is interesting. And then they don't stay too long on it. They just kind of move on to the next part, which pissed some people off, I guess. But I thought that's the way things should be done. But that was like a mix of The Republic and Logan's Run. You know how in Logan's Run they're like, was it they get to live to 30 or something?
Yeah.
And then they get shot.
There was another.
Everything's perfect.
There was
It was probably one of my favorite Michael Bay films. Was The Island. I
don't think I've seen Logan's Run. What was that other one where they reach the age of 30 and then they die? It was a really cool sci-fi movie with Amanda Seyfried and Justin Timberlake.
I have no idea.
In Time.
In Time, that's it.
Yeah, they didn't. I don't think it was 30, maybe, but they were given a specific amount of time, and time was like currency. So if you wanted to buy some milk or something, I don't know if it was that bad.
Age 25, you stop.
Accumulating age or something. So yeah, then you'd be like, oh, I want to buy a car. Okay, well that'll cost you like 5 years, kind of thing.
Yeah, so. Really cool sci-fi.
It really got you thinking because it was like really crazy concepts and like in the sense of like time is money and like
that's it. There was the little green LED timer on your arm. There was like a subdermal LED screen under your skin. I'm just showing.
And like companies, it really showcased that companies are just really stealing time from their employees and stuff like that, and stealing time from people, and you won't get that time back, kind of thing. And it's kind of really, if you sink into it metaphorically and stuff like that, it's kind of a crazy concept movie.
Yeah, class.
Yeah, there's a thing as well is that I've noticed that it seems to be I feel that both utopias and dystopias are really badly done when it's difficult to avoid politics in them, but when politics are brought excessively into them, they just fall on their arse. Because if you try to say this would be horrendous, this is why Star Trek did it well. Because you could, like, for example, if in the Next Generation, they show quite clearly you can fail, and you can be killed, and you can fuck up, and you can be a complete loser. You just won't, die of starvation. Nobody dies of starvation because, they couldn't find a job. But you can still be a complete loser and fuck up and, blow yourself up through your own stupidity and all that. But you can also do what we like doing of taking on struggles, like big, difficult challenges and being the best at what you do and all that sort of stuff. And they kind of, I think, I have a theory that a lot of people were talking about Deep Space Nine and how they sort of showed the cracks in the Federation during Deep Space Nine. And I saw one person talk about how that was because, for example, the Borg dealt the Federation such a massive blow that it had to militarize, and I like that idea. And also, I feel that partly from a showrunner's perspective, because Deep Space Nine is set in one place, they had to start going into all that sort of stuff, because if they didn't, it was going to be almost impossible to tell the story. Because it's fine if you're moving around from place to place every week, but if you're stuck in the one place, you're going to have to talk about the society. So they put in some imperfections in Starfleet, but it's still essentially a utopia, and it's actually not being in Starfleet that's the problem.
They always kind of had that, though, hints of it in the original Star Trek and in Next Gen. I think they did it way more and even in Voyager, I think. But they did do it a lot more in Deep Space Nine. And I know everybody hates the movies, but they even touched on it briefly. Well, actually, they sort of were more in your face about it with the Abrams, the second one, whatever it was there, the name. But yeah, basically RoboCop. Essentially, they played on it with the actor who played RoboCop being sort of crooked in the system, kind of thing, in a perfect system.
Mhm.
And again they explored it in very subtly, though I found in original series and next gen, but they was still underlining their, like, with all their objectives and prime directives and stuff like that, and their code and stuff. Sometimes it got a little murky and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is that, like, I was watching a David Stewart video that actually is what gave me the idea to suggest this to the guys, because I was wanting to hear what they'd say about it. But he was talking about utopias and dystopias, and he was talking about the fact that Thomas More, I think it was, wrote the book Utopia, which is where the name comes from, and it's basically like a thought exercise with hints of comedy, because he was aware of how subjective and how counterintuitive it would all be, and how it's almost a pointless exercise to come up with a utopia.
Yeah.
But he wanted to try it anyway, and like, there's even little lines in it where he's like, I can't remember what it was, but it was like something. I'll just paraphrase it to give you the mood more than anything else. He didn't write this specifically, but it was stuff like, "Oh yes, and everybody takes each other's bins out, something no sensible person would do." Like little footnotes like that, and it's like, I found it quite interesting, because it's such a difficult book to read that I'd missed a lot of that stuff, and I was quite young when I'd skimmed it, and it was after David Stewart went through it, I was like, holy shit, yeah. And I went back and looked at a couple passages, and I was like, yeah, sure enough, it's bordering on black comedy. And but that's what I feel like utopias are best done when they're just trying to draw your attention towards something else. And you can get a lot of good stories about just by taking a dystopia or a utopia and flipping it, so either fixing the dystopia, or like what was suggested earlier of like taking the utopia and going, oh, but what if it's actually really just communism? Like,
yeah, or yeah, I don't know, anything going on in the background. People are just too oblivious to see it because they're enjoying their happiness, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
there was an interesting thing in Man of Steel as well, that because that's basically like a dramatization of Plato's Republic as well, which is what, like, they put that in the film as like a little Easter egg that Clark's reading that later on. But basically, the whole design of Krypton in that is based off Republic. But something that occurred to me when I was thinking about this topic was the fact that the interesting thing about what Plato wrote, as well as in Man of Steel, is that the people in it have been dehumanized to the point that they don't actually care that they're living in the dystopia.
Yeah.
Like, so because if you look at Feora, for instance, she has no idea what she like. She doesn't have emotions in the sense of morality and stuff like that. Like Zod hasn't got the capacity to question what he is. The council just kind of do the same thing over and over again, and it also lends you to the opinion that, like, maybe Krypton was fine right up until it wasn't as well. There's also that. So that was an interesting thought I had about it, but yeah.
Well, I think that the other thing too is that I think that a utopia is impossible to have, because to have a utopia would be where everybody can enjoy their life the way they want in freedom. But, however, to have freedom means having differences, and to having differences, how do you really create a world that fit, like, one shoe fits all kind of thing?
See, that's
like,
what I was gonna...
I know that...
Oh, go on, sorry.
I know that sounds silly, but like if you think about it for a few minutes, it's really sort of impossible. And I think a dystopia could be very... I don't want to say that would be impossible, but I think that would be very hard too, because I think that people are just... we'd either be dead or we wouldn't be. And I think a dystopia, we'd all have to die. And I think if we didn't die, I think we'd just innovate again and rebuild and figure it out, because that's how we are as humans.
I'd say China is like a dystopia at the moment with their whole...
Yeah,
social...
which it is, and that's the thing, is dystopias don't just have to be in the future, obviously. Like, they can be in the present or the past, because if you look at, like, people, it's both obviously become associated with the future, But if you look at like England under the what do you call them? The Normans, when they first came over, that was a dystopia. Like, if you look at The Witcher: The Wild Hunt, that's basically what England was like at that time, and it was an absolute, like, just like I've used the word already, but it was actually a hellscape. Like, that's when the modern castle was kind of really brought into Britain, and it was designed to terrorize the population. Like, that was its purpose, and that's why there's so many castles in Britain, and so you can go to the past to find a dystopia as well. But
I'd say
people generally don't use that word if it's in the past, but it would still be correct.
I'd almost say some like Middle Eastern countries in the last few years with just the war tornness of it. Like, you look at a picture of it a few years ago and it looks like a city or whatever, and then just it was bombed in the last couple of years, and now just look, it's all in rubble. That would be sort of a dystopia kind of thing.
Yeah, and like Flatmeister said, China, I would say, without having been there as far as one can say, China and perhaps Iran as well seem pretty dystopic to me.
Yeah.
There was something I was going to bring up with regards to Nerd Waffle. You were saying about it's impossible to have a utopia because that would mean taking away individualism, because everyone would either have to be fully on board with what the ideals of this particular utopia is, but people are, people want to be free, have free will, and they want to have individualism and freedoms, but will that conflict with the utopia's ideals? And that's where it came up to be Bioshock, the first Bioshock, with the City of Rapture.
Yeah.
There was Andrew Ryan. I mean, I'll bring it up on screen, just like I won't play the audio, but I'll just play the opening. You get in the bathysphere, and I'm trying to remember what he bloody says now. He goes, "Oh, I decided to build the impossible. An ocean, city under the ocean, where the
is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow."
Exactly, I can really get behind those ideals of, "Hello, my name is Andrew Ryan." He goes, "Is an artist, an artist free from the censor, the scientist free from petty morality,
yeah.
and ethics." And there's a big flaw in Andrew Ryan's. Like, he's saying, you can be you can pull the great chain of rapture, pull your weight, is basically what he said. I think there's audio files that you can pick up throughout the game that there's were they like workmen or something, and some of them got injured and they're just cast aside, like, "Oh, well, you're useless now, you're a parasite." So it was it was so easy to, with Andrew Ryan's ideology, was that it was so easy to go from being a person that could help pull the great chain of rapture to being a parasite. And
because the whole point was that it was an ideological position, because if you read the audio tapes or listen to them, there's a load of times in it where he was going to act and stopped himself because of his ideology. Like, he was going to maybe do some charity or round all the city council members up and get them to organise better or whatever, and then he's like, "Oh wait, shit, no, I can't do that because that's not individualist." And it's like, it showed that. And then I think that they felt the need to put the shoe on the other foot in the second game with the crazy collectivist person as well. I think collectivism is slightly obviously insane, if that makes sense, but like the thing with the first game that I thought was interesting was, like, there's a bit where they're going on about the, how you mentioned the great chain of industry, and he's going on about how horrified he is at the little sisters.
Yeah.
And he says this thing, like, is almost to kind of comfort himself about the horror of it, where he's just like, "Well, her little hand was on the great chain right next to mine. I.e., she bears responsibility for her position just like I do." And I was like, whoa, shit, you can justify anything by that. But at the same time, if you want to pick it apart, he's not wrong. Like, people have at least some responsibility for their own position in life, but the point is how much responsibility. Like how much responsibility can a child actually have? Like not very much, not compared to him.
Well, because that was forced onto the little sisters, wasn't it? Was it Frank Fontaine's orphanage, and he was like secretly going, "Oh yes, I'm creating an orphanage for the children," and it just shows like the flaws in objectivism, in that whole ideology that. Like where's the limit when you say, oh, don't censor the art, place where the artist won't be censored and the scientist isn't restrained by petty morality and ethics. I'm like, and they justify that by going, oh well, we've made scientific breakthroughs, well let's use these little sisters by putting this special slug in their stomachs that can process this this special DNA altering substance. That they justified it with their ideology, and it was quite
I don't think that BioShock did this exactly, but it's something that other people do, which is it's where a lot of both utopias and dystopias lose me, which is basically somebody takes their worldview and makes it into a utopia, and then they take the thing that opposes their worldview and make it into a dystopia, and it's like, I really hate when that happens. It takes all the art out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit in the game. The level design is superb. It's got extra storytelling in just the level design. So Andrew Ryan, I think he says like, oh, that he's against God. I think in that speech, doesn't he? He goes, "Here's a man not entitled to the sweat from his brow. No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Russia, it belongs to everyone." And I think there's the bit. Where is it? I scroll along. Oh, went too far. He goes, "Yeah, belongs to everyone." He goes, "Oh, I rejected those ideas and I chose the impossible. I chose rapture." And see, with him being, like, oh, you can help pull the great chain, be an individual, and embrace my ideals, and then he bans. When people start shipping in the Bible, don't they? Into Rapture, and he, they start smuggling it in, and he doesn't he like confiscate them, doesn't he? And he starts arresting people. He's like, no, you're not allowed to have. That's the thing. Like he's going, no, you're not allowed to have views that conflict with mine. I'm like, well, hang on a sec, Andrew. What about pulling the great chain and being an individual? Like it's quite scary how he could justify, oh, that you're a parasite, you're not pulling the great chain.
Well, I think you've summed it up pretty well. I don't have much to add to it. I was kind of going to say we like in regards to like dystopias, I think it's interesting that there's something about them that I think that it has to be built into the system almost. Like if you look at say, it's almost got to have that kind of inescapable claustrophobic feel to it, because it's like if you can get out, or there's options, or there's opportunities, it's not really a dystopia, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like if you take Blade Runner, for instance, like that is so oppressive that it's obviously a dystopia. If you take fucking any of the dystopias that you get, it's like it has to be built into the system in some way that like Kafka or something like that. It has to be all encompassing in a respect. Even in BioShock, like there's no escaping. Once you're in Rapture, there's no escaping the system. Whereas if it's like just a run-down part of the world, like if you take like say Fallout for instance, that's not a dystopia, because it's like there's still stuff you can do there, and there's still places in Fallout that are nice to live. But
I don't know. I think it's I think it could be a dystopia because at one point it was thriving and successful and whatnot, and then as soon as the bomb drop or bombs or whatever, then it became sort of survival free ground type thing. I don't know.
One thing I was thinking about, if you look at particularly at Gears of War, is I was trying to work out whether it was a dystopia before the Locust came, and I don't think it was. But the reason I don't think it was, or a utopia either, and I don't think it was either. And then that actually, when I got my answer of it wasn't really either, I was kind of like, oh wait, that kind of tells me a lot about what a dystopia or a utopia actually is. It's like the planet of Sierra was pretty fucked, and it had massive problems, and it had large scale war all the time. But if you actually look around Jacinto and places like that, what's left over from the peacetime areas, they're actually nice places. So you're like, oh, okay. So
wasn't the Pendulum War was 100 years? It was a 100-year war, wasn't it?
Well, it was a perpetual state of war because they were just
fighting over
They were just strategically fighting each other to stalemate all the time, so that nobody would ever have the upper hand. And kind of you can see it. You can see it around the world today in smaller places. If you even look at the factions fighting in Africa or the Middle East, it's they'll take a pop at their enemy, but they won't ever try and decisively win, because then they would have to actually rebuild the country or whatever. So they just they'll take a pop at their enemy, and then their enemy will take a pop at them, and the warlords and stuff know what's going on, but they don't ever plan on actually winning.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But the thing is, I don't know, it seems like it has to be related to some kind of overarching system to be a dystopia in some way, or even just the lack of one.
Yeah. I think that could be a trait. I think, well, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but for me, I think that a dystopia or utopia has to come from a previous system, and the system either went supposedly right or supposedly wrong. So in the Utopia's case, everything, again, I say in quotation marks, supposedly went right, and in a dystopia, things supposedly went wrong. I think it's supposed to be a reflection of society or whatever, if things went right or wrong, and an examination of, again, whether they went right or wrong, what would happen, kind of.
Yeah. I was going to say a question to you guys. Do you ever think that, do you think that it's an oversimplification to make the setting either of those things? Do you think it should be like our planet, where it's a mix of both? Or do you think it has, does it have to be a mix of both to be a good setting, or can the dystopia and utopia be done well? Is it naive, or is it well executed, or what? What's your opinion on it? And the chat as well.
I think it depends on the story, doesn't it? If it plays a major role within the overall arching story. I was going to mention like the Deus Ex series.
Yeah, the interesting thing that, because I just had that in my head when I was asking you guys that as well, the Deus Ex franchise, and I was thinking about the fact that that's not actually a dystopia. It's it's on the verge of becoming one.
Yeah.
It's just about to be one.
What, the Jensen prequel games?
Both. It's if Adam Jensen and JC Denton were not around, then each timeline would tumble into a dystopia very quickly, but they managed to kind of pull it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, again, I'm sort of with Flat on it really depends on the story. I think you can have both. I think you can have one. I think that if you play to the advantages, it can be a really good tool. I know that I think that it is a sort of a cliche type thing, but I feel like I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that if cliches are used well, they can be used properly. They can do a good job, and I think that this is that case where if you do your dystopia or utopia or both, or however you want to mix it up, if you do it well, I think that it can be a fantastic tool for telling a story. Because I think part of storytelling, I think people get fascinated of the what ifs and stuff, and I think that sometimes some series will do a what if things go supposedly right or supposedly wrong kind of thing. So it can be a device that way. I think it's a great tool. I think it has to be used properly, but that's pretty much my opinion on it.
We've got Principal Officer in the chat. He said Dinotopia. I think Lost World, but all the dinos are safe, even raptors. Socialism with capitalism.
I think that's why we're not living in a utopia right now, because there's no dinosaurs. I think if dinosaurs still existed, I think they would wear business suits and have the world issues solved.
Wait, but hang on. We had Marcel on last week, and his dystopia contains loads of dinosaurs.
That's true.
Oh yeah, Chris Cole, yeah.
So, a dinosaur is just a tool. Depends whose hands are wielding it. I was just thinking, like, I think when people try and go for an absolute dystopia or utopia, often hamstrings the story quite badly. But I think dystopias are easier to do, but they can still suffer from that thing of, like, oh, here's the opposite of my worldview. It's dystopia. I think we're seeing that more and more, especially with all the political stuff coming out in comics. It's like when they want to write a dystopia, they just they take a politician they don't like, they take a speech of theirs, and they make it a world, for a villain of the week style thing. And it's like, the world as run by a guy I don't like is a dystopia. And it's like, that's not how it works. It has to be pretty well done, And I think also, sorry, quickly, but just if you were going to write a utopia, I don't know if you guys would agree with this too. I was thinking you could have a utopia where awful things still happen, so long as it was like person on person.
Yeah.
Sorry, Crumple. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Crumple earlier. Go on, Edward, for you.
I think that a politician, I think that there's nothing wrong with putting a politician in. I just think that it should be more on a thematic level rather than a personal attack against somebody. So I don't know, but
I mean, now that you mention it, like, what do you think of Mortal Kombat 11's Shao Kahn saying, "Let's make Outworld great again"?
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
Thanks.
That reference is so blatantly on the nose. It's gonna date the game.
I mean, even if you don't like Donald Trump, it does more harm to you because you're giving somebody you don't like a spotlight kind of thing. So it just doesn't make any sense. So if you don't like him, if you like him, it's obviously not good. If you don't like him, it's not good, because like, why would you want to bring attention to somebody you don't like?
Yeah, that's funny though.
It's also like it's done without humor. So by humor, I mean, like, you can do something as a joke, but it's not a humor. Because you've not done it from a place of, let's all laugh together. It's like, no, I am putting a message forward and I'm deadly serious about it, but I'm presenting it in a funny way. That's not humor.
Yeah, that's the thing though. Shao Kahn is all about wanting to domineer other realms, where Trump isn't trying to take over other countries. He's just saying, right,
it just makes him, like, I don't know anything about Mortal Kombat, but just from that brief description of him, like, he's a conqueror of other realms, it just makes him seem unimposing and silly when you take it was effectively just a slogan, and like try and put that on him. But like with that, it could be done. Like, but even then, it's not because we do it all the time. Like, not just the four of us, but like people on the Twitter and stuff like that who don't particularly feel strongly either way about Trump will still use the MAGA thing, it's a slogan. You know, it can be repurposed for anything. You know, make comics great again, or whatever the fuck you might have. It's you can do it for a funny reason, and you can present it in a funny way. Like, and I've been like, I don't know, I can't think of a specific example, so I'll just rework one. But it's like I've been shouting, you know, this is crumple country and things at people, you know, because just having a joke with it can work. So if they'd had, the other thing is you can tell how whether it's an honest joke or not, because usually they let the hero do it. So, like, for example, if they might not like Donald Trump, but maybe if they still had frickin' I can't remember any of the Mortal Kombat fighters. I only know Street Fighter. But like, if they had, you know,
Johnny Cage.
Yeah, Johnny Cage shouting, you know, this is Cage country. That would be fucking funny, and people would probably like it.
I'd probably suit his
because they put it on
character
the bill, and everybody's like, "Oh, I see. Right, okay, this is one of those games."
Yeah.
And like, I'm reading this book called Demons just now. It's called. It's by what's his name, Dostoevsky, and it's really interesting because I think he was a Christian. I'm not sure, and he was like quite patriotic about Russia, I think, and he was telling a story about the nihilists, who are obviously a bad thing for Russia if you know anything about the nihilists. But like, what he did was all the characters in his book that are the nihilists are the most interesting ones. Like, so what he's doing is he's trying to present their point of view, but he's not made the people despicable. He's made them really interesting and entertaining people to read. But it's just their worldview is, in his view, wrong. But he's given them he's given the reader a chance to go, look, if I make these people really interesting, do you still think their views are awful? And it's like, you could actually perhaps agree with them, I don't know. But the point is, he's not given his worldview to the fucking villain. I'm only halfway through the book, but I'm presuming that whatever Dostoevsky's worldview is will probably come in the shape of like a homeless guy who picks pockets or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, at the moment, it's the big, strong, honorable military guy that is a nihilist. So you're like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder. Whereas now, with I can't remember the guy's name. The other one, not Johnny Cage.
Shao Kahn.
Yeah.
Shao Kahn, yeah.
They've given the shitty, annoying political slogan to him, so you know exactly where they're coming from. Whereas if they'd given it to their hero, you'd be like, oh, this has made me think, you know?
Yeah.
Which is another thing you could probably do quite well with the dystopia or a utopia, is take a view that doesn't actually agree with you and turn it into a dystopia. Because this is the thing, is like, you've got to be doing these for artistic reasons. So it's like, if you just take whatever political view as your own, right? But you might say, right, in real life, this is what I think. However, there are certain tropes to do with this school of political thought that would make a great dystopia. So I'm just going to do it, you know?
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Orson Welles stuff recently, and that's something he tried to do. Like, he was talking about like getting the balance right between political statements and art, and he was just like, you know, you do things for artistic effect that are maybe completely at odds with how you feel politically. And I think that's when stuff's at its strongest, you know?
Yeah, well, it's something that I said before on the show, is like, challenge your own opinions too. Like, when you're writing a character, there should be multiple characters in your story, and they may not agree with you. One of the characters, if you met them in real life, like, you can tell that you're doing a good writing job when you have a character that in real life you'd be like, you know what, I don't agree with that person. It might be a hero, it might be a villain, but I don't agree with them. And that's sort of how real life is, because you might have a friend who you might not agree with, kind of thing. You might have someone you don't like who you don't agree with. How do you interact with them? How does the character that doesn't believe that, how do they interact with them? And if you have a bias, it's hard to write. I mean, you can have a little bit of bias, that's just human nature, but if you have a major bias that's really shining through, it's going to be hard to write really diverse characters, and really sort of sell what you're trying to pitch, because it loses. You know, I don't mean realism as it has to be 100% real, or but it loses that genuineness to it if all the characters have sort of the same idea kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a tweet the other day on my timeline. This person was saying, with all the people that are complaining about stop having politics in comics, he goes, Marvel's always had politics and social justice in its comics. I'm like, yeah, it was written with subtlety and nuance. People don't mind, political or social themes in their fictional medium. They want the story to come first before a political message.
It's just I've tried making the argument against that before, but I've since realized that it's a complete straw man designed to waste your time, and I don't even dignify it anymore. Like it's like politics have always been in comics. Like, okay, fine, I'm just not going to speak to you because you're beyond convinced. Because they know what they're doing when they say that. They know fine well what they're doing. They know that they don't believe that. And that they're just trying to get a rise out of people. And I know that sounds contemptuous and dismissive, and maybe it is, but that is 100% my experience of these people are not willing to be convinced, and they're not willing to entertain any view that isn't their own. And like what you guys were saying about challenging, Nerdwaffle was saying about challenging your own ideas, like if we look at our much beloved George Lucas, who's the coolest character in Star Wars? The baddie. Who's the second coolest character in the Star Wars? The other baddie. Like, like I fucking love Luke Skywalker. Don't get me wrong, but like the Emperor and Darth Vader are probably like the characters that are made the most unashamedly, undeniably formidable. Like he takes the view that he then creates as the evil guy's view, and he makes Palpatine and Vader the two most powerful guys. And he doesn't just make them powerful in a I can do loads of stuff way. He makes them powerful in the sense that like they have the powers, but it's also they're the most competent people. They get the most done. Yeah. They get the coolest designs, they get the coolest lines. And because even if you compare, like, if you take all the best lines from Star Wars, like about 60% of them will belong to the bad guys as well. And if you look at what Palpatine actually manages to get done over the course of the first 6 movies, it's like there's no question that he's a fucking badass, but he's also the bad guy.
He really commands.
More people need to do that.
He really commands the camera, doesn't he? Like, whenever Palpatine is on screen, your eyes are drawn to him. And I was just gonna take this moment to quickly plug your video that you did about a week ago, Crumple, which was your analysing of symbolism and Darth Vader. And there's a really cool point that you brought up, was that Darth Vader is such an absolute mad lad, that he's so ballsy, he puts the buttons and consoles to his life support out front and center on his chest, and he's like, he's like, come at me, bro. You want to mess with me?
I dare you to press one of these fucking buttons.
yeah, that made me crack up, and that really got me thinking when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, never thought of that.
Yeah, because there's no reason. Like, I know that they've got to show off the design of the suit and make it look cool, and they've got to communicate to the audience, look, there's robotic parts in this guy, and I understand that those are the real reasons that start the process off. But at the same time, when you're looking at the character, you're like, hang on, why in fuck's name would you have your life support console on the outside of your costume? And then you're like, wait, nobody would ever dare press it. Like, even in a fight, nobody would dare press those buttons.
Find your lack of faith disturbing.
Oops.
What did you do?
Well, I always like the theory that, and I don't know, that, like, it's not a full great explanation, but I like the theory, like, that they've always said, where it's like, oh, the Emperor designed it that way to keep Vader in check, but that still the argument still lends to your argument, Crumple, of, like, the Emperor's that badass that he's like, yeah, I've got, like, this second badass guy on a leash kind of thing. Like, that's how badass it is. It's like, we're so badass that we have badass on a leash.
Yeah.
It makes
and
you
it's
wonder.
like, that's the thing, is like, they're constantly doing that. Like, even the Emperor is, like, when you eventually meet him, he's constantly winding Luke up, like, come on then. Go on, try it.
Do
dare
it.
you.
Well, that's why it makes me wonder whether Palpatine designed that as like a kill switch. And he always knew that Vader had hatred for him, and that he wanted to kill the Emperor. Wanted to kill
Well,
him.
he always knew Luke could off him, or not Luke. Vader could off him really easily. So,
yeah, they were frenemies. Like I think they were.
Yeah.
I honestly think they were genuine friends, but I also think they genuinely hated each other a little bit too. But
Yeah.
they did know each other a long time, so it's fair enough.
So that's why it makes me wonder whether he is still alive in this like next Star Wars movie coming up, Rise of Skywalker, with that laugh at the end in the trailer, with the Death Star piece.
Let's
off in
put
the
it
distance.
this way, right? Ian McDiarmid is coming back, but the Emperor is not alive, and nor is any of the original cast at all. They might have the screen name of like Han Solo, but it wasn't Han Solo.
Yeah.
But anyway, like no, I just thought that was really interesting to Nerd Waffle's point of like one of the best beloved things in Western media of any kind is Star Wars, and it's like, what did George Lucas do? Made the bad guys absolute badasses. It's like it's a good route to go down. And also, if you look at the dystopia, the Utopia of the Republic and the dystopia of the Empire, he has like he shows them both. Like, so that the fact that the Empire came out of the Republic shows that even if the Republic is his perfect utopia worldview, which I'm not saying it is because he doesn't state that, but let's say it is, like this is the exact perfect political system you want to have, he still shows exactly how you would tear it to bits and what would come out of it if you did tear it to bits. So it's like he knows there's problems with it. So even his utopia, he wasn't scared to go, hey, look, here's the massive hole in it.
Yeah.
There was
Whereas, like, if you look at that, if you look at the sorts of stuff we're seeing now, they would never dare do such a thing. The bad guys are always bumbling old horrible idiots. Usually posh older dudes, and really arrogant, really inept, to the point where you're wondering how they're even in charge of anything. And the dystopia is always like a cartoonish rendition of what the person thinks their political opposition is. It's like you would do 100 times better to actually, either flip it and make. So I guess the equivalent would be me having a communist hero. I don't know, like set yourself a challenge like that, or at least give your enemies, if you will, the credit of like because it's like fucking having formerly agreed with some of the shit that you see coming out in these comics. I'm under no illusion as to how people agree with some of it. So, like, cartoonishly pretending that nobody in the world agrees with any of this would be stupid, because people obviously do. So you've got to acknowledge that, and it's like your writing will be better because of it. Like, again, if you just take the Empire of the thing, like everything must be perfectly ordered and headed by one guy, and it's like a completely pyramidal structure, and it's a dictatorship, all that sort of shit. Then they make the guy at the top really cool. They actually show that under the Empire and the Republic, there's some planets didn't even notice a difference, in the way they were run. And then they had like the Rebel Alliance doing very questionable things, but for a completely necessary purpose. So there was never any of this. Star Wars is pretty black and white, and even they don't go full black and white,
There was another game that I don't know if you've played this one. It's Syndicate. It came out 2012. It underperformed.
I've heard of it.
Really cool cyberpunk game. It's based off of an earlier game. It was like a top-down isometric RTS game. But yeah, it came out 2012 and apparently flopped because EA decided to release it at about the same time as Mass Effect 3. I'll just play like the trailer just in the background for people. But it's made by Starbreeze, who made Riddick, Chronicles of Riddick games. But it's set in like basically corporations have like almost like the Peptis challenge. It really reminds me of the Peptis challenge. There's
so basically it's because EA'd.
Yeah, EA'd basically. But yeah, all of these syndicates, they have like patents and copyrights of all these different technologies. Like, they've developed this new implant called a dart. It's the dart implant that they put in sort of the base of your brain, and there's no need for like devices anymore. So you have unlimited access to the dataverse basically. You can connect to anything via this chip, and so these syndicates also have agents. They're like corporate enforcers, and that's why it really reminds me of like
We call them sales representatives.
Exactly. It really reminds me of the Peptis challenge with.
It's nothing like the Peptis challenge. There is only one Peptis challenge.
But there's so I'm trying to remember like it said like several billion people are connected to they have the implant. The rest, the people that aren't chipped, are completely like basically exiled from society, and these cityscapes are like massive tall skyscrapers, and it's almost like a visual representation. All the people that aren't chipped basically live out of sight at ground level. People, you can't see them.
Yeah, like that's kind of what made me ask the question of, do you think the dystopia utopia model is childish? Because I was thinking of Deus Ex, and it's the fact that, like, with even, I'll just use the older games as an example, because some people, everybody loves the first game, and then the other ones all have their proponents and detractors, but everybody agrees that Deus Ex 2000 is legit the core of the franchise, so we could all agree on that. And so what they have is they have obviously the mechanically augmented people, and how they are able to just do things that normal people cannot do, and they are just the highest of high end, and basically make normal human beings redundant. And that's where most people would stop and make a dystopia story of, there's the have and the have-nots, and if you're not augmented, you're dead, and that's that. Like you're a slave class or whatever, right? Yeah. But Deus Ex doesn't stop there. It then goes, right, okay, what we've done is we've made this class of super soldiers, but we need to keep them under control. So what they do is they make it so that mechanical augmentations are almost impossible to get hold of, and it's completely taboo to be seen in public with them, to the point where, okay, so if you're a pleb, you can never fight an augmented person, but if you're an augmented person, you can't go out in public. So you have to be part of the system. And that's just like a side note, it's just a footnote in the game. Like most people would make that their whole story and make a dystopia out of it. So I always think that, like, as much as there's some dystopia stories I think are essential, and because they're like archetypal stories, or because that is the story, I always think that, you could probably just add so much more to this by taking it from either utopia or dystopia and just moving it a little bit closer towards the middle, and you get like 10 times the story. But not always. I'm just for food for thought, I guess.
I highly recommend anyone play Syndicate. I'm not sure if it's backwards compatible on the Xbox One. It might be. I'd have to check.
I played it years ago. I think I did with it, but it was pretty fun. It had some really weird, not weird bad, but interesting mechanics. Can't quite remember them, but I remember
there was the dart. It's called dart overlay, which is like a
slow motion or something.
It puts it in slow motion, and you can also, like, enemies are highlighted as orange, like, so you can see them through cover, and you can, if you activate the dart overlay, you can actually shoot and penetrate through cover. If you've got like a high caliber rifle or something, there's some really cool weapons. Like there's a Gauss rifle that can, if you hold the lock button, you can lock your aim, and the bullets will hone in round a corner.
Yeah.
If you sort of aim slightly to the left, right, or up, or whichever, you can shoot over cover and will kill them. I never got a chance to play the online co-op. Like there was co-op missions as well, but it seems to be backwards compatible. So yeah,
that was a cool thing actually. Gauss rifle is also featured, and as is like the smart vision kind of thing, is also featured in the Crysis franchise. And that was an interesting thing where Crysis moves fairly quickly into dystopia.
Yeah.
But it's by the by, and it's used actually as characterization for profit, because all the people in the story are like, holy shit, Cell has taken they've taken advantage of the alien situation and the instability it's caused. They've infiltrated every level of government and all the armies, and they now basically control the entire world. And Profit's like, okay, that's fine. You go deal with that. I've got aliens to kill. And they're like, do you not care? Like, no, of course I don't care. I've got aliens to kill. And that's used all the way through as like a thing of like, oh, he's really not a human being anymore, is he? Like, like he really doesn't give a shit. And it's also a case of like, that's one way of looking at it, but the other way to look at it is he's got his eyes on the actual picture. And I don't think they did enough with that, but they did enough that it was a really good theme to use. I just felt like they could have done more with it, and I would have been very happy, basically. And I thought that was interesting. Of like, okay, so they're actually living under legit dystopia, but it's made no difference to him and his cause, which shows you how important his cause is. That if the whole world could fall into dystopia and he barely blinks, shows you how important what he's doing is.
I need to come back to
That's an interesting thing. You don't see much of that.
Yeah, I need to come back to Crysis 2. My copy is like, I've got a glitched copy or something. Like sometimes walls aren't there or disappear, and cutscene, like in-game cutscenes play but without the volume, without the audio, which is irritating. So it's a bit irritating. I never played the first one, but to come back to the second one. But so I highly recommend people play Crysis as well as Syndicate. Yeah, I think you'd enjoy that, Crumple. Probably be able to find that quite cheap.
Yeah, I might check it out sometime. I've looked at it quite a few times before in reviews and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of these ones. I think I've played so many games around it that have used similar things that's why I've never picked it up. But I'll probably check it out eventually.
It's got some really cool abilities with the dart implant. You can cause there's Persuade, which is you can get an enemy to fight for you, and they basically freak out. They start shooting their teammates, and then they kill themselves. There's Suicide, where they pull the pin on one of their grenades, and if you've got other enemies surrounding them, that kills them as well. And then there's a third ability, and I'm trying to remember. Backfire. It causes their gun to sort of backfire at them, and it stuns them. It throws them on the floor for a bit, and that makes them vulnerable. So yeah, some cool abilities and things, and there's like a skill tree that you can sort of apply sort of upgrades and things like that. Yeah, the story got me one, and it's got some quite high profile actors. It's got Brian Cox.
All right.
He's like the CEO of Eurocorp, the company that you work for. It's got Rosario Dawson, who plays Dr. Lily Drawl. She's like sort of the lead top scientist that works for Eurocorp. And what's that guy? He was in Alien Resurrection and The Crow. He's got that really gruff voice.
I don't know, but I'm going to guess it's Keith David.
No. What is his bloody cast? What was his name? It'll come to me shortly.
That was something you just made me think of something because you mentioned Rosario Dawson. Because she was voiced one of the characters in Dishonored. And that reminded me that like a lot of fantasy settings seem to use dystopias without realizing it. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like because people like I was saying before, people just associate dystopia with the future. But like Dishonored is kind of steampunkish, but it's a dystopia. Like because it's an empire that rules with an iron fist that is crumbling. And there's plague everywhere, and everybody's at war with each other. It's pretty dystopic, but people don't describe it that way. And then, because that's the thing is like that's what I mean is if you don't advertise that your thing's a dystopia, it's sometimes better. And the Legacy of Kain saga is essentially a dystopia from start to finish as well.
Yeah.
But that's again a more fantasy-based setting, so people don't seem to associate it with dystopia. But that's exactly what it is, and it's interesting that you can take like any dystopia you care to mention, keep the structure the same, but change the setting, change the costumes or whatever, and it's like people almost won't even notice. It's quite funny.
I love Dishonored. I'd love to play the second one, that whole Clockwork Mansion and stuff. Yeah, I love the whole...
the second one was great. I think thematically and atmosphere-wise, I still prefer the first one. But the second one is gameplay-wise probably a bit better.
Yeah, the whole plague and stuff was really cool.
Oh. Yeah, they dropped the ball with the second one. It was quite incoherent, but it was great. But it just didn't have the focus I felt of the first one, or the punch of the first one. But I still think they're both great. And then Death of the Outsider is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Loads of great symbolism in those actually.
Oh, maybe we'll get a follow-up video from you.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying your symbolism series that you're doing on your channel.
Cheers, man.
Yeah, it was. I tuned into the Darth Vader one. It was thing.
Yeah,
oh yeah, I remember that was funny.
It was funny.
So I was going to say we've come up to about the hour and 10 mark. Should we sort of wrap up? Is there anything else?
Yeah, Nerd Waffles be quiet for a while, so if you want, I'll say a quick final word and then I'll let him take over and have longer. But I was just going to say that
I just don't know much about like Deus Ex and Gears of War, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I do want to get around to playing it, but just haven't.
Well, you know about Shadowrun and all that, though. You could probably speak to that. Actually, if you want to talk about that for a bit, I've not played it or whatever, but I'd be interested to hear that in the context of this discussion.
I think it was going along maybe I could be wrong, so please feel free to correct me, but I think it was going along with what I have an opinion of, like, maybe that goes along with what you're saying is, I wouldn't say Shadowrun is a dystopia, although it kind of is, because it was like, you're in like Seattle kind of thing, so it's like, was a thriving place, and then shit happened and sort of became a dystopia. But I think that you can have steampunk and cyberpunk without having it be a dystopia necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think about it, I think Shadowrun would be a dystopia just because of the definition that I find that I said earlier, which is it has to be something that was relatively established that either became more established or less established to become a dystopia or utopia. But Shadowrun, I don't know. If it is a dystopia, it's not much of a dystopia. They don't really mention it that way. I don't think. Not that I've heard.
It's kind of like a weird anarchic free-for-all, though, isn't it? With like kind of corporation-y overtones. Am I right?
Yeah. So there's shadow corporations and sort of magic is in this world kind of thing. So like when you're a Decker class, you're trying to steal money from mega corporations and stuff like that, or like shadow corporations. Well, that's what you're doing anyways. Like, it's essentially, that's why they call it shadow runners. Is essentially you're a shadow runner for jobs and stuff like that. But
you just reminded me of Mirror's Edge as well. That's a sort of utopia / dystopia.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Shadowrun.
I've heard of that. I've never played it though.
It's good. Shadowrun Returns is really good. The unfortunate thing is Shadowrun for Sega was really good. And I sort of found one on a website that you can play directly on the website. It wasn't any good. The Super Nintendo one, there was one for Super Nintendo. It was completely different and not great. There was one for Xbox 360 that wasn't too great. But the pen and paper game, because that's what it's based on, is pretty good. and Shadowrun Returns, which you can currently buy on Steam, is really good too.
It's kind of a cousin of Dungeons and Dragons, isn't it?
Kind
Because
of.
I always associate them, but I could never remember whether they were directly tied in or whether it was just kind of people liked to do both.
I'd say it's the same. See, I wouldn't say it's a cousin because it's not really like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's the same thing. So yeah, it's in the same family in the sense of they're both pen and paper RPGs, but the systems are different. Like the stats are different, the way you play, the mechanics are different, and stuff like that. So yeah, they're. I guess it cut. Yeah, now that sorry, like I guess it would be sort of a cousin instead of a brother or sister to it. It'd be more of like a distant relative of it in the sense that they're both in the same family but very different. Dungeons. Yeah.
They could meet at a family gathering, but they could also legally marry.
Yeah, they don't really marry well either. They don't. You couldn't really play. I don't think, anyways. Now I'm not an expert, but I don't think you could play a Shadowrun setting in or a Shadowrun game in a Dungeons and Dragons game, and vice versa. But I don't know. It's possible. Anything's possible because it's all numbers. But I think Dungeons and Dragons have their own version would do instead. Instead of doing all that legwork and stuff required. Yeah, I don't know. Shadowrun's a good game. Shadowrun Returns because it's the easiest to get a hold of. It's available on Steam, and they have a few of them, and it's actually really cool because it's actually grid based, so it's actually like a strategy, and it's almost like an RPG in a way, because you have to make decisions and choices and stuff like that when you run into people. Your stats come into play, like when you run into a security guard kind of thing. It gives you like 3 options, and one of them requires like, talk to the security guard and convince him to let you by, is like charisma. Just sort of run past and hope he doesn't see you, like that's your luck option. So the diplomatic option, or just fight them kind of thing. So like they play off of different strengths. Like sometimes they'll give you different options, and you try to use your strengths to your advantage. So if you have high charisma, you might be able to sort of talk your way by the guy, kind of. Which is very pen and paper RPG. And so when you're in a battle, it's also like a grid. You can only walk so many spaces. So if you've played Final Fantasy Tactics, it's kind of like that when you battle. So it's a really fun game, and I recommend it to people. And it's sort of a dystopia, but it's a weird sense. Like in a way, I don't necessarily want to say it's a dystopia because it is, but it isn't. Like I qualify as it used to be Seattle. Now it's sort of run down a bit, kind of dystopia. But at the same time, they've sort of adapted, and their world they're in now is kind of just the norm kind of thing. Which can happen, but it's sort of evened out more than a dystopia or a utopia would, kind of.
Yeah, I'll have to check the series out.
I remember I really enjoyed the Sega version, but it's really sort of dated in a way. So this one sort of keeps the same style and almost feels like this is what they wanted to do back in the day but couldn't. And I remember, I really wanted the Sega version because I really enjoyed it. I found it on eBay and I paid like $80 for it. But it came in the Sega case and everything, so
yeah, we'll have to check that out. an eye out for the. I remember seeing the Xbox version or the Xbox.
Yeah, I heard. I haven't. Truth be told, I haven't played the Xbox version, but I've heard bad things about it. So maybe people might enjoy it, maybe not. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend starting with that one. I'd recommend starting with Shadowrun Returns.
Yeah.
And then if you're really gung ho about it, then I would go to the pen and paper game, if that's your thing. And then if you're even more gung ho, I try to find it on eBay and buy it for like a bunch of money.
Should we go to some final words? Anything you guys have to say to sign off?
I would just say that, like, while I love a good well done dystopia, I think you're always better designing either a dystopia or a utopia, and then, like I said, move it further away from that extreme, and you've probably got a better setting. Not too far towards the middle, so that it's just a bland setting, and you have to do a ton of world building. But move it just far enough away that you've got some counterpoints to the main establishment. Unless you're telling a very simple, like, man overthrows government story, I don't know. And then the other thing was what Nerdwaffle said is, if people are making dystopias, it works in reverse as well. But if you're making a dystopia, try and steelman your opponent. Try and show the strengths of the system or person that brought about the system, and explain, this is why the fuck this thing exists. It's not just like an act of God. It's like, actually, there's some serious strengths, maybe not merits, but strengths to this design, and exploit those and make the audience go, all right, that's pretty decent, actually. That's pretty clever. I'm invested now.
Yeah.
Too often we see just like, oh, I don't like this, I'm going to make it the established order in my fantasy world, and that's exactly how it comes off. So yeah, set yourself that challenge.
What about you, Corey? Nerdwaffle?
Actually, I want to mention something kind of storytelling wise related, but not related to the topic for my final words. Is I wanted to point out something interesting. I hate to do this because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the episode yet, but I really, really want to point out, for all those who are like, oh, comic book nerds are like, fanboys are never gonna like a female character. They're always gonna claim Mary Sue or that character. And I saw it on Twitter today. It was interesting to talk about it. And just somebody brought up Rey from Star Wars and Arya from Game of Thrones. And so neither of you care if I spoil this. I hope I don't spoil it for people at home.
I've seen the episode, the latest episode. Yeah.
So Arya kills the Night King, and at first I was like, I kind of wish it was Jon Snow, but then I thought of it, and I was like, you know what? They did exactly what Rian Johnson was trying to do, but they did it better. And I know that you can't compare apples and oranges sometimes, like Star Wars versus Game of Thrones are completely different shows, but it's sort of the same principle in writing of they built. And I know that you don't get that with a movie. You don't get 6 seasons, but you can, even in the limited time, still show progression in character.
Yeah,
they do have it in good movies.
Arya Stark was training to be assassin. She had a learning experience by she stole one of the faces, didn't she, to get personal revenge. He took her sight away. She learned from that mistake and had to.
It's even going past that, man. Like, it's going back way to the beginning. Like, when she took out the Night King, she literally used every skill, or almost every skill, but I'm going to say boldly every skill that she learned in 6 seasons and applied that. And that's how she beat the Night King.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, fanboys aren't gonna like this. It's like, I don't hear a whole lot of people who have seen it, who are like, "Oh, fuck Arya, fuck, why did she kill him? Why? Oh, she just killed him because she's a female." No, nobody. I have not heard a single person say that. But yet like they're like, "Oh, people complain because Rey." It's like, "Oh, you just don't like strong female characters." It's like, no, we like well written characters.
Exactly. Rey has had no learning moment, has she?
Exactly, and Arya has just had so many, and that's how she barely defeated the Night King.
Well, she got overpowered by the Nightwalkers chasing her down the corridors as well.
Hell, if it was Rey, it would have been just, oh, she threw the dagger and killed the Night King. No, Arya ran up, the Night King went and like grabbed her and picked her up, and you're just like, oh fuck, she's gonna get it. And then all of a sudden she drops the dagger and picks it up with her other hand and shanks him. And I'm like, that's what Rian Johnson was trying to do, but just did a really crappy job of it. Yeah. And I think that speaks volumes. I think that speaks volumes in the fact that people just want good writing. It doesn't matter that they're female or male. They just want good characters and good writing. They want strife for the character, because Arya has had her share of the shit in the Game of Thrones world, like everybody, and she's overcome it, and she's come to the challenge, and she's met it, and she surpassed the challenge and beat the Night King. So, I don't know. That's just my final words. I know it's not related to dystopias and utopias, but it's just good writing, you know?
Yeah. So my final word would be maybe not have your story set immediately in the dystopia or the utopia. Like, maybe have it, like, your story is like midway through its lead up into it, the world becoming a utopia or dystopia. I mean, like Deus Ex Human Revolution is great. Like it's in that there's political and social strife going on with there's all this tension between people that are pro and anti augmentation, and you can see all these little hints of there's all this tension that's building up, and then throughout the game it then becomes, well, I've not played Mankind Divided yet, but based off the endings, the multiple ending choices you get of Human Revolution, it's sort of then, I've seen the start of Mankind Divided, but it's sort of that then becomes a authoritarian dystopia, where people who are augmented are treated as second class citizens. The whole augmentation apartheid, I forget what it was called. Something apartheid.
Mechanical apartheid.
Yeah, that's it. Mechanical apartheid.
And they, just quickly, not to interrupt, but like they had both sides make excellent points in the pro and anti-augmentation thing.
But I like it with the sort of having it set like just before the world becomes the dystopia or the utopia, and seeing it gradually become that. So that's my sort of final words, rather than having it bang straight set in this is the dystopia. I mean, we forgot to bring up multiple other examples, like Equilibrium, that's set in a dystopia, controlling people's emotions.
I'd say that's almost a mixture, and it's weird to say, but it's sort of weird, because in a way it's a utopia. It's a, how would it be?
It'd be a totalitarian utopia, wouldn't it? It's
like it's sort of a realistic utopia in a way that it's sort of, they think it's a utopia, but it's not really, because again, going back to, they had to take away people's freedoms in order to make it a utopia.
Well, the other thing is that for all we know, everybody actually consented to it in the first place as well.
Yeah.
In the beginning, at least.
Would love a sequel to Equilibrium, but we could go on forever on that. But with
Yeah,
that,
we'll need to maybe come back to this one because I was also thinking about we could talk more about like the techniques that maybe go into making them effective and stuff like that. I mean, we talked about a little bit of that already, so that's fine. But I was just thinking, and we'll need to hear Switch at some point as well.
So yeah, with that,
But no, I really enjoyed talking to you guys. Cheers.
Yeah, it's been really good conversation. So
yes.
So with that, I've been Flatmeister. It's been Nerd Waffle.
Remember to hug the person next to you. Be the change you want to see, and keep it toasty.
It's been Crumple Point.
I've got nothing.
You tried to think of something clever there, and it didn't come to you.
something.
Story of my fucking life.
something. Crumple. All bow to Crumples.
Something dark side.
Everybody bow to Crumple, our savior, and Utopia giver, Crumple.
Yeah, I'll drink to that.
And so with that, it's been the Flat Pack. See, I've been Flatmeister. Don't forget the show is every Wednesdays 11 p.m. GMT. That's 6 p.m. Eastern. If you know a creator, indie creator that's comic or game developer, tell them about the show. We'll happily have them on. Get them to DM us. So we're looking for more guests. So with that, it's been the Flat Pack Show. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.